business. And so we're going to talk about how that impacts all of this. And we've got a great cross-functional group that impacts a lot of different aspects of the business, represented here alone across infrastructure, data analytics, the full suite of creative functions, and across, of course, I should say, the legal aspect of the business as well. They're all here. They're going to walk us through it. And so where I want to start first is have each of them introduce themselves and what they do at their companies. You've heard of their companies, of course, but what they do, I think, at those companies is critical to pin down. So, Chris, let's start with you first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Chynoweth. I'm an attorney at Cooley LLP. Cooley's a firm that predominantly focuses on the tech industry and their investors. Previously, I was in-house counsel at Fox Sports Australia, so I've worked in the media and entertainment industry extensively. At Cooley, every day I'm advising AI model developers, people who want to use AI models, people who have AI infrastructure on the development and commercialization of their AI. So it's an everyday thing for me these days.
Hi, is this on? Hi. Katja Reitemeyer. I work at NVIDIA, and I'm the director of AI and data science for the media entertainment space, mostly focusing really on the VOD, SVOD, FAST, etc. space, and looking particularly at data, recommender system, any kind of data analytics, what I usually call the not-so-sexy generative AI part, but very important. So very excited to talk more about this today.
My name is Meagean Keane. I lead business strategy for the video portfolio at Adobe, so really driving how and what and why we're prioritizing what goes into the products, everything from core workflows to AI solutions. But my background is actually as a filmmaker. I have my master's in film from USC Cinematic Arts, and I spent about a decade working as an editor and producer in documentary features, which anybody who's ever worked in documentary features knows also means commercials. Yeah.
Sure. There we go. Hey, everybody. My name is Gregory Shiff. I'm a principal architect for media and entertainment at Dell Technologies. So I spend my time building weird systems, breaking systems, working closely with our partners at companies like NVIDIA and Adobe and so forth, and advising engineering about how to make those products better for media and entertainment and all of those kinds of workflows. And yeah, I've been in the space for my whole career. I'm based in Seattle, which is kind of a big engineering home base for Dell. Previous to that, I was in New York City, did a lot of work with all the three-letter networks out there, building infrastructure, and now on the West Coast, spend a lot more of my time kind of in the cinematic universe. So that's me.
Oh, and by the way, I'm Andy Wallenstein. I run Variety Intelligence Platform, which is a subscription extension of the Variety brand, and AI, generative AI, is a big part of what we look at VIP, as we call it, and I'm going to share some of the data and insights that we're looking at in the AI space a little later in the presentation. But let's talk first with these guys some more. And you know, Renard said it best earlier when he was talking about the focus needs to be more on how AI enhances in the pipeline, not replaces. And so let's drill into that a bit with what your companies are doing. Drill into some of the products and services and areas where enhancement takes place. Do any one of you want to sort of take the lead here in how enhancement happens?
Yeah, so I can kick us off. At Adobe, we think about AI in two buckets. So there's assistive AI, which we've really been implementing into the video product specifically for the last 8 years. Things like scene edit detection, remix to shorten music or lengthen music to the desired length that you want, keeping sort of the beat and pace that is in the original. Text-based editing or speech-to-text that we've brought into the products in the recent years. And those things are really about addressing the tedious, the mundane, the time-consuming things that no creative wants to do. Then there's generative AI, right? So creating net new pixels from your imagination, from anything that you can think of and can write a good prompt for, you start generating something new, right? And we just most recently have done a sneak of some functionality that I think is actually still working to enhance or break down some of the barriers, specifically in post-production. We snuck a feature that will be coming to Premiere Pro later this year called Generative Extend. So I don't even have to ask in the room if anyone has experienced this. If you've edited video, you know this experience. You're cutting something, you come to the end and you think, oh, I really want to let this have a long fade to black as the music is coming to an end, and all of a sudden you get an alert, insufficient media. And you think, God, if I only had a couple of more frames, a couple of more seconds, I could really just pull out this pacing perfectly. Or you have an interview subject and they make this really poignant comment and then they start continuing to talk and you're like, oh, if I could just have them sit on that comment for a moment, a breath. So with Generative Extend, the intent is that you will be able to just pull out for a few frames, a few seconds, to really hit your pacing perfectly, to make sure that your edit is working the way that you need it to. Now, I know that all of you can relate that in the past, that would have taken hours to figure out, because you're trying to find single frames that you can duplicate so you can add a little bit more time, or you're going through your archive to figure out, do I have another clip that I could use? And now it's going to be just seconds. So we're really looking at not how we replace the creative, but how do we help remove roadblocks, enhance creativity. And the other thing that we're really seeing with generative in particular is creative ideation. Maybe I don't have that shot yet, but here's what I'm thinking could really work. I'm going to fit it in. I'm going to use it as a placeholder so that we can go out and really find the perfect thing to fit.
I think one thing I'd add, the law is actually influencing that distinction you make in terms of providing that assistance to, free up creatives to work on sort of more the high value stuff. The approach that the US Copyright Office and the US Patent Office has taken is that under US law, something that's generated by artificial intelligence can't be protected by copyright or by patent. And so what that's actually driving is, and we've seen a lot of companies implement policies internally to have more of the lower value stuff being done by the generative AI tools with human input, and more of the high value stuff, your Super Bowl ads, your brand designs, to be done by humans, because that's going to ultimately be protectable.
Yeah, and from the NVIDIA side, obviously a lot of this runs on NVIDIA hardware, so we're doing a lot of the acceleration that makes this possible. And we're also a platform company, so there's tools like Rapids, which really accelerates data analytics, data science on our platforms. And so, there's always the picks and shovels, right? So a lot of this innovation that we're seeing, this fast-paced innovation in AI is built on GPU and the technology, the massive parallel processing that offers. And we're also working with a lot of companies like Adobe, like Dell, to help accelerate, to help really solving the hard underlying problems, because we're not really a direct-to-consumer. We work with a large partner ecosystem. So that's something, if there's companies here that work in that space that want to partner with NVIDIA, that have things that, where they want to look at more foundational problems that need to be solved. A lot of times we will actually have solutions for that we're not going out to directly to our customers, but really with the partner ecosystem, for them to solve, the specific problems, and we're really building a platform solving a lot of the underlying problems. And I think a lot of people don't tend to know that about NVIDIA, that we're actually very strong in software. So, definitely go to our website. There's a lot of different solutions, whether it's for data science or analytics or acceleration in general, AI models, et cetera. So. And then obviously Dell.
Yeah. So from my perspective, what's been a really interesting shift over the course of the past year is that we, and as Dell, we're a portfolio company, right? So we make everything from your high-powered workstation to servers in the back and all the plumbing in between. And we've seen artists start to use these tools on that workstation as like an individual silo with a bunch of GPU resources sitting on that workstation. And I'm kind of rapidly seeing that stuff actually go to the data center in the back, right? So that I can centralize those GPU resources. They can be used by, the whole team. So it's not like just a couple of people that have all the NVIDIA goodness on their workstation and everyone else is excluded from it. But that's being driven by the tools, right? So do the tools allow me to push that stuff to the data center to a centralized, say, GPU farm or something like that? And this is it's like a push-pull in terms of like, is the infrastructure there to be able to build it? And then once it's there, do the tools support it? And it's a rapid evolution, but it's kind of interesting to see that move so quickly.
So I want to look at, step back and look at the overall media value chain and see where the areas of opportunity are. And if I could ask just for the slide to come up here, that this is something that we are working on at Variety Intelligence, and getting a sense of, this is a data piece that we looked at, and I know it's probably a bit hard to see in terms of the small print here, but we were looking for all across the digital TV value chain for production, distribution, and consumption. Where are the parts of the value chain where we're seeing that AI impact? And there's so many different pieces of this puzzle, and what's interesting is when the industry was asked, where's that impact happening? It's at so many different places, and yet AI is making itself felt at varying degrees. And I was curious, as you guys looked at this data, was there anything surprising to you? Was there anything that you saw as big areas of opportunity? What did you guys think?
I mean, I think it's hard for the audience to see which ones are the large buckets, but the large buckets, I will tell you, are the places where AI is providing connective tissue between the different stages of the process. So from pre-production to production to post, into delivery, analytics, and then back into, okay, what's the next project, or how are we evolving the process? So I want to say here is like discovery and video analytics as the 73%. So I think that, there's a huge part of the conversation at Adobe that is just that. How are we connecting the processes? So recently, Frame.io has joined the Adobe family. So connecting, from camera to cloud into post-production and leveraging the intelligence that comes along with each of those processes into the next. Right now, there's so much data loss in between each of those stages because they're different teams, they're different functions, and there's so much opportunity for us to leverage the intelligence that is gained at each step into the next stage. So finding your media, managing your media, searching your media. One of the biggest priorities at Adobe this year for AI is around media intelligence and really ensuring that search and organization is optimized so that throughout your pipeline, you really know where your media sits. And then there's automation, obviously. Like when we talk about this assistive AI and peak productivity, it's about removing all of these things that creatives don't actually want to be doing, right? So yes, people are fearful, and I get that, but really there's so much about AI that is returning creatives to being creative because they're not having to waste time on these things that they don't actually want to be doing, like waiting for a transcript to come back, getting a piece of media that was edited previously and finding where all those edits were because you need to recut it. Those things are giving you time back to be creative. And ultimately, I think that there are places where I really encourage the creatives in this room to embrace the AI, because the more that you're understanding it and mastering it, the more you're going to be able to have it be a real asset into all of your creative processes.
Sure. Katja, discovery is a big part of what you've been focusing on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and on the data analytics side, same thing. We're looking at the intelligence of what is being produced, what, again, I'm working quite a bit in the VOD space. It's obviously very relevant for these companies to retain subscribers or gain more subscribers. So knowing who your audience is, what your audience enjoys, what they're watching, what they're stopping to watch, that is just such a large amount of data that unless you really employ some sort of data science and data analytics, you have all this data, but you can't really do anything with it. So this gives people the ability to actually look closely at, like, because this show was watched that many times by this cohort of people, and we're seeing a lot more personalization on recommendations happening as well. If, you've probably seen this, if you go to Netflix or Hulu, it'll say, like, you enjoyed this, you might enjoy this. And I don't know about you, but personally, a lot of these recommendations are typically not great. And that's because, the data analytics are just not that good yet, or the data amount is just too vast to actually analyze on a continuous basis. And that's what we're helping with, and that's what we're helping to accelerate. And then that feeds back into actually also production. Like, these things worked well with audience. They enjoyed that, so we can feed that back. And then on the flip side too is, it used to be that you really had to be a Python programmer, a very skilled data scientist to even work with this kind of data sets. And what we're seeing now with RAG systems and LLMs is the ability to just talk to this data. And you can say, like, this show, like, what was it and what was it about? What did people like? What kind of cohort liked it? Give me more of that data, and what did they actually enjoy? And so there's just a lot of things that are now, again, the tedious tasks of, just wading through tables and tables of Excel spreadsheets and whatnot is now actually presented to you in a much more digestible format in graphs or just talking to it. So
I can't wait for the day that... I can't wait for the day that we never have to touch Excel ever again. That
right?
it's just the AI that just kind of does it for us.
Well, if you look at the new GPTO,
we're getting
that
there.
will help with that.
But this lines up a bit, with what I'm seeing in terms of where this is having a lot of impact with our customers, particularly like content owners that are looking for ways to most effectively get their content in front of the right eyeballs. And from a strategic standpoint, what I've been advising people on, quite a bit over the course of the past 24 months or so is, like, what are the models you're going to use, and what is the infrastructure that it's going to take to run this, right? Hey, I'm a little biased working for Dell. You could shove it up in the cloud, but wait for that bill when it shows up, right? And something that Renard said in his keynote that struck me is it's all just math, right? None of this is magic, and so it's not even that hard, really, when you dig in and start doing those math problems about, like, how big is my training set? What is it going to take? What kind of GPU resources am I going to need? And then you just kind of do what's it going to cost? Is it going to be worth it for me? And move from that, move on from there. So that strategically is a lot of the advisement that we've been doing on the Dell side.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to pinpoint an area that is actually a pain factor now, where you start a POC. Don't go in and say, like, we need AI. I'm like, okay. Like, try to work backwards and look at, okay, this is where we see the problems, this is where we see the issues, that's where also we might see the biggest ROI, and start small, and and definitely make sure that your infrastructure is in place. And then, essentially data analyze what comes out of this, and then move on to larger projects. Because we get that a lot at NVIDIA, obviously, is it's like, we need to do AI, and our fact finding is typically of, like, okay, where do you actually see problems, and where can we, obviously from our perspective, where can we help? But it's not going to be you're going to convert your whole company or your whole business into AI driven within overnight. It's definitely a process.
The dirty secret being that, like, one of the most challenging parts of this is curating your training set, right? Like,
yes,
we're just going to do AI.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well,
garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And what you say is exactly what our teams, especially on the Pro Tools side of Adobe, is gatekeeping. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in research at Adobe. There's a lot of new creative ideas and really fantastic not only models, but like implementations that we're thinking up. And our team is looking at, okay, but what is really solving problems for creatives? What is really addressing the needs of the people who are using our tools, and bringing in what's most relevant, and not necessarily bringing in the things that aren't needed or aren't good enough yet.
Greg mentioned data training, Chris, and I was curious. To me, that opens up a whole legal hornet's nest. What are the implications there? Because I feel like this is an area that's going to keep you and many of your colleagues busy for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly is the case that using third-party data sets is keeping a lot of litigators in court, and it's certainly an area where, unfortunately, it's truly up in the air. So we're kind of advising a little bit without clear answers. There's a lot of different things to think about as you curate a data set, particularly if you're taking it from third parties. I think three key ones. One, everyone's probably heard about all of the different copyright suits that are being filed against AI models by content owners, artists, creators, essentially saying that the use of their copyrighted content for the purposes of training models is copyright infringement. The models in turn are saying that what they're doing is transformative and it's a fair use, which is a defense to copyright infringement. And we don't know what the answer is. The courts, it's in a number of different courts, and we probably won't know the answer for a long period of time. And so that's something that's going on in the background. And to the model's credit, a lot of them are coming out there and putting their money where their mouth is and standing out and saying, we'll indemnify for claims in the event that we end up we're wrong. Privacy is a really big thing when you're thinking about training with data that includes personal information, and particularly biometric information. So lots of cool stuff happening around people being able to create avatars or to create digital replicas or imitating someone's voice. But these are highly regulated areas with lots of things that haven't been sorted. So essentially getting the right consents. Can someone withdraw their consent? If they have, how do you take that out of the model when it's already been trained? We've seen the FTC come after different models that haven't got the right consent and made them do algorithmic disgorgement, i.e. delete the model after all that work and cost. So that's an issue that's that's definitely front and center. And then also, data scraping. A lot of people have the view that you can go and take data sets online because it's publicly available. But there's actually a lot of people saying, well, you can't take that content. My website prohibits it. I have technological measures in place to stop you doing that, and that's my content. So these are all issues that don't have clear resolutions. People are sort of leaning into doing third-party content using the fair use argument. What we are seeing a lot of is data partnerships. So a lot of big corporations, data owners, content creators are actually licensing to some of the bigger models. They're actually entering into relationships so they get some revenue and they can actually pay the artists. And then for the models, it works for them too, because one, they get access to high quality data. Two, data that's probably not publicly available, so it's not accessible through public means. And three, it has really high quality metadata, so that helps with the data mapping and the model training process. So there's been a lot of that, and then obviously lots of clients are training on their own data, which is stuff they own and are much more under control. So lots of issues.
That's been Adobe's approach, is Firefly models are all trained on Adobe stock content where copyright has lapsed or content in public domain. And to your point, to the extent that we offer indemnification to any companies that are using the models in their work, and to ensure that it's commercially safe and to ensure that it's usable in their marketing, their publicly seen content. But I also really want to encourage anybody who's really interested in this topic. There's the other side of it, which is content authenticity and content credentials, and making sure that there's transparency in saying when something has been altered or something has been created using AI. And my colleague, Morgan Pregrocki, is going to do a whole session on content authenticity and content credentialing and why that's really important to bring transparency to this topic in the industry. 1:30 today, upstairs.
Cross promotion there. Greg, Chris mentioned data privacy, which made me think also about your infrastructure neck of the woods here, because when we're talking about infrastructure, you were talking about, where do the tools reside, and there's actually more issues there than just like cost. And data privacy to me is yet another issue that you got to think about when you're deciding about infrastructure. And I just want you to walk through, because there's going to be people here like, all right, what do I do in terms of infrastructure? Talk through what's not such a simple issue here. What are the factors people got to think about, including data privacy, including cost, when they're deciding on infrastructure?
Right. Well, data sovereignty is a huge part of that, right? You want to maintain control of your IP and control of your data. But, thinking through this, like, if I am going to do a foundational model train, which not a whole lot of people are really going to do, certainly in the media space, but you got to think about how to keep those GPUs hungry or fed, right? And so the compute needs to be next to the storage, and so that's a huge thing that we've been dealing with a lot of our customers. In fact, we just got certified for NVIDIA SuperPod with one of our storage platforms, PowerScale, and that required 40 gigabytes, big B, a second of throughput to train those models. So it was kind of ridiculous, right? But that is a big part of it, is how can we make sure to really properly utilize, if we're going to spend money on GPU resources to do training, how do I make sure that those GPUs are fed during that training process? Once I do that train, or if I'm doing a fine tune, how do I keep that fine-tune up to date? This is where we're working with a thing called a RAG architecture, right, which is kind of this continual feedback loop, if you will, of keeping that model fine-tuned. And so it really comes down to, like I said, that math problem of how big is my training set? What is that ongoing fine-tuning training going to look like? Where is that going to take place? Where does my data reside around the world? Where is it? Is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem? Is it some combination of the two? What do I need then from an infrastructure perspective to be able to make good use of that data, right? So those are really the things that we're working with our customers.
I also want to take a step back here and ask, as we're all talking about servicing the content business in Hollywood, how we feel about the timing of that and where the business of Hollywood is right now, because here we are, it's like 6 months or so of a business coming out of the strikes. It's a business that's in recovery. It's going through a lot. The streaming business has been difficult. There's a lot of pressures there. What is that like as you're dealing with a business under pressure? Or is it receptive to all these innovations? Because sometimes for a business to be experimental and try new things, it can be difficult at a time when maybe they're looking to be just very conservative because, they want to stick to the tried and true at a time when things are rough. I mean, do you guys feel that at all, or am I mischaracterizing the mood?
I think yes and no. I think there's definitely, because I think a lot of the stuff that you see in the press about generative AI is very much about, taking artists and writers' jobs away, and it's really not about that. So I think there's a hesitation to engage because they don't want to be seen as, okay, we're working in that area, when really, like I said, I work on the less sexy generative AI part, which is data analytics and data science. And so that's when, we definitely have these discussions where there's always this, okay, we don't want to talk about that. But everything else, the big part of their business is losing subscribers or gaining new subscribers, a lot of competition, there's rebundling of content. So knowing about the content you have, knowing about the content you want to produce, and we talked about, data quality, all that is really not up for discussion so much, because it's realized that because there's so much data, there's no other way to handle it than to actually automate it and to use models and to train it and to make it more accessible. So I think the hesitation is more what we see in the press and what is sort of the general consensus about what AI means in Hollywood. And there's a lot other things that are not about replacing scriptwriters or, an AI-based script or content or actors, any of that kind of stuff, likenesses, those kind of things are not really on the forefront of discussions that we're having anyways.
Yeah, we're very constantly engaged with the creative community, and we're hearing the same thing, that there's optimistic hesitance. that there's excitement, and I think that coming out of the strikes especially, it's important for all creative disciplines to be really going into this eyes wide open. And so the result of the strikes, that there are these clauses being written in, is important. I think that that's a good outcome, but really creatives are hungry to be creative across the board. And so I think that the hesitance and the fear makes for good headlines, but I think that when we really dig in and are talking to the creative communities, there's a lot of optimism about how much it can return them to the creative. I mean, personally, I graduated from film school. I was so excited to go out and tell great stories, and I found myself under a desk, trying to figure out why the SCSI drives weren't connecting, wrangling data, on the phone to a competitor who I won't name, asking like why things weren't working, and it just became this job of data wrangling, and it wasn't creative, and it wasn't inspiring, and if I'm honest, it's one of the reasons that I actually got out of filmmaking, because it was, and you hear also from assistant editors who are saying, I'm not sitting in the room with an editor anymore. I'm not learning about the creative process. I'm not learning about storytelling. I'm managing media. I'm digging through drives. And I think that there's a lot of potential for AI to actually return these creative mentorships, to return people to actually doing the parts of the job that are so exciting and that inspired them to start in this industry in the first place.
What about talking about sort of getting away from the headlines, what's not focused on as much in terms of AI, monetizing and the licensing of content libraries, not, generating images, but taking what's already sitting there and activating that and making more out of what's already sitting there. What are you guys seeing in terms of how AI brings that to life, if there's legal issues there, that kind of stuff?
I mean, at Dell, we've been saying for years, talking to people about getting value from their archive, and now I feel like it's already possible, really, for the first time, right? It was a discussion for years about, you've got this archive, like, make use of it, and they're like, yeah, we'd love to, but there's not, I can't hire enough people to go through this stuff, and unfortunately, perhaps half, maybe more than half, isn't worth anything, but how do I find that stuff that's really gold? And so we're finally seeing that dream, and working with some of our partners to enable that. So,
yeah, and I think that also goes back to content discovery, and I think we're seeing that in music quite a bit. You talk to 10, 15-year-olds, and they're listening to Pink Floyd, because it came up on their Spotify playlist, or things that normally, like when I grew up, I'm not going to date myself, but you had cassette tapes and you listened to the radio, and you didn't, you found an album from your dad somewhere in the basement. It was like, oh, my dad listens to that, and that's very different now. And I think the same is already happening and will happen with other content. And like Greg said, probably some of it is not great, but discovery and really actually knowing what you have. And I was talking to a company the other day, and they're looking at much more one-on-one cut trailers for people. So when you go into a Netflix, you see that little flag, and it actually shows you quick parts of the movie or the TV show, but it's actually tailored to what you like. Like if you like action, it'll actually do a super cut of the action scenes, and that might get you interested in the movie, versus somebody that's more into the storyline, sees more story-driven content in that short teaser. And so that sort of one-on-one or cohort customization, I think, will help these companies retain subscribers and get people to discover content that they would have never watched.
Are there newer areas of AI research that are starting to show traction? I hear things about like NERFs and Gaussian splats and that kind of stuff. Anything there that is starting to bear fruit that people here need to pay attention to?
I mean, I think that the VFX pipelines are very much going to be influenced by this, right? The old ways of doing photo scanning and all the rest to model a 3D environment. There's better ways of doing that can handle like reflective objects and things that was really hard to do with traditional photo scanning. So I think that's just finished NAB about a month ago or so, and met with a bunch of my visual effects customers there, and everybody's looking to see how they can integrate this stuff into their pipeline in some way or another. Either from a creative standpoint or from just a planning standpoint. One of the more interesting discussions I had was a company that was looking to be able to better automate their bids for when a VFX shot comes along and they want to bid on doing that work. Today it's all in someone's head about thinking about how much is that going to cost, how many people is it going to take, what's the infrastructure going to be involved in it, and then trying to bid that out. And they'd had perhaps in the past gotten themselves into some trouble by underbidding things and then all of a sudden losing money on work. So they're looking at how can they look at all of their historical the past 10, 15 years of VFX work and put that into a model so that when a bid comes out, they can be really accurate and really fast in terms of scheduling that and getting it done and actually making money in the VFX business, which is no small thing.
What's interesting about the research now, so internally at Adobe, we have like our product teams who are developing products and working on the products day in, day out. And then we have our labs, or our research teams that are really existing outside of the realm of the products and more in the realm of what ifs. What if we could, and they, if anyone's ever watched or been to Adobe Max, it's like those sneaks that we show of early concepts that research has been working on. What's wild now is like there is so much what if, like there's so much potential for what we could be doing that the research teams are now coming to us and being like, where should we focus? Like, what are the things that we should actually be thinking about first and foremost? What are you hearing from customers? What are the pain points you're really wanting to address? Because the potential for research is so vast that we're having to narrow sort of in the reverse that we used to because of all of these new technologies and model training that are coming out.
So what are you telling research?
Well, so right now we're telling them, media intelligence and really being able to understand media from the inside out. We're working on the models, like really making sure that we're generating models that are high powered. I mean, when it comes to text to image, just in the last year, the sophistication from Firefly Model 1 to Firefly Model 3 has been like mind blowing. And really that's where we feel like the focus needs to be right now, is just improving those core models so that we're able to start cracking open the problems within the products.
But I would assume text to video would be an even...
text to video is underway.
Okay.
We made that announcement a couple months ago at NAB that text to video is very much underway, and we'll be seeing the fruits of that in Premiere Pro by the end of the year.
Okay. As we saw, Google had a little announcement on that front yesterday. It just seems to be the place where there's just a ton of attention.
But I will say to that the other thing that we're really recognizing is this industry is moving so fast, and that all of the different model companies are addressing different use cases in different ways, and different models are addressing different things better and others worse. And that's why also at NAB, we announced that we're in early explorations for how we could integrate Runway, Sora, Pika into native environments in the creative tools in Adobe so that people can choose. Do I want to use Firefly video model, or do I want to use, Pika for this given use case that I know one will work better or more to my legal needs or what have you. And I think that that's important. I think a couple years ago, bring your own storage was the big topic. How are we managing our media? Where are we keeping it? And now it's, what model am I wanting to be using?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Increase in clients, obviously when it first came out to 18, 24 months ago, general purpose was what everyone was focusing on. Now people are looking at the more focused models that are doing specific use case much better than the others.
Yeah, and on that side, NVIDIA, we just launched NIMS, which is NVIDIA Inference Microservices. So that's really all about deploying these microservices easy on the cloud, have them accessible, and those are going to be rolling out. We're working with partners so that standing up these models and working with them really quickly becomes a lot easier, and you don't need to be a very well-trained data scientist. So I think I alluded to that earlier, like the ability to actually use AI, use models without being trained in Python and having years and years of training.
Yeah, and for my customers, it's a lot of build versus buy, right? Are we going to wait until the feature comes out in the latest version of Adobe Premiere, Photoshop, or what have you, or are we going to build something ourselves? And does that make sense? Where is it going to give my business a strategic advantage over my competitors? Frankly, it comes down to that, or save me time to be able to be more creative and do I have the people that have the expertise to be able to build this, or do I really just need to wait till I can buy it?
Yeah, and I think all three of us have mentioned that word ecosystem, right? Like enabling people to build the ecosystem in the way that they want, the way that best services the things that they're trying to do is what's the most important to really make sure that we're continuing to push things forward.
And so when we're talking about specific use cases, different software feeding specific use cases, give some examples of what are specific use cases, because for instance, there would seem to be initial fears about okay, oh no, I'm going to create an entire movie out of text to video, but of course it feels like that's not really what that's going to be. Text to video is just going to be for pre-viz. So what are specific use cases in these instances? Can you give?
Yeah, I mean, so I am. I'm going to reference the ones that we're working on right now first. So, some of the use cases that we're tackling this year, I mentioned generative extend, also object removal, object addition, being able to just paint something out and be like, that boom mic that no matter how much you spend on a production always seems to make its way into the frame. I just need that gone. But then there's also things, Topaz is doing a great job with upresing. There's a company, Quickture, that's doing really interesting work around summarization. When you look at functionality in Adobe tools like text-based editing and taking that transcript that's been generated and saying, okay, I want to cut this down to something that's a little more bite-sized, and these are the main points I want, and that it'll summarize it in that way. And we're working really closely with Quickture in terms of making sure that that's an integrated environment where people can be using it right inside Premiere Pro so that they're not having to go out to some other, interrupt the creative flow and go out. But that's when we talk about choosing the tools, making sure that there are plugins or panels that are working right in your creative environment so you're not having to break that flow.
Got it. Well, we wanted to talk brass tacks about utilizing tools, and we definitely did that here today. How about a hand for our panelists? Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.